tonight we're going to hear from Martin Smedjeback, a peace activist and non-violence educator who was presented with the Martin Luther King Award this year and was previously awarded the Non-Violence Award from the Swedish Fellowship of Reconciliation. There will be an opportunity for questions after the lecture, and there is a link to a recording of this lecture, which is now available on the Facebook event page. Now I'm going to hand over the floor to Martin, and I hope you'll join me in giving him a warm welcome tonight.
Thank you. Let's see now how the volume is. Is it okay? Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Utrikespolitiska föreningen here in Göteborg, and thank you for coming and wanting to discuss this topic with me, civil disobedience. As you can suspect, English is not my mother tongue. I suspect that not everyone here has English as a mother tongue. So I hope we can help each other if there is any things unclear. In some workshops I use this that says L for language. So if something is unclear in any way, you can just point this to me and I can try to say it in another way perhaps. Is it okay? Great. Can I bring this down? So yeah, we have until 7 o'clock. I hope that's okay with everyone. I'm not going to talk here by myself, I hope, all the time. I have included some exercises, small ones, in this lecture. So not only in the end we will have time for a bit of discussion, but also in the middle somewhere. Is there any questions now before we begin? Anyone, any comments? No? Okay. The first time I took some time to think about civil disobedience was when I saw this news, actually, as you see, from this city. It was in 1998, and I heard that there were 3 Swedish peace activists going to Great Britain with the aim to hammer on submarines carrying nuclear weapons. One of them was Annika Spalde. I never met her or anyone else of those peace activists before, but I was intrigued, so I wrote to her, Annika, who sat in prison after having been arrested at this action. And I said that I was impressed by her courage to do this, and I shared her vision of peace. But I was skeptical to the method. Is it really right to break the law like she did? Is it really effective, and is it the most ethical thing you can do? So I had many questions, and she wrote back to me, but it took me quite a long time to process the topic of civil disobedience. But around 10 years after I wrote this letter to her, I was myself ready, in fact, to do a bit of the same. I had just cut up some fences in Eskilstuna and ready to hammer on some Swedish weapons. So how did this change occur? Quite dramatic change for me. Well, we have to go back a while to figure this out. And here is me and my twin brother. And we grew up in a quiet suburb of Malmö. And we never talked about politics or international issues in our home. So I partly blame my parents for being so late in my willingness to be active in the world, for a better world. And actually I wasn't very non-violent as a kid. We fought quite a lot actually in some period of our, now we're friends, but I don't know if you can see who's me. Any guesses? The left one? Right. Ah, it's the left one, that's me. Yes.
You've changed.
And actually, when the state said, now you have to go and do your military service, I didn't reflect that much on that. I've never, this was even earlier than I wrote to Annika. So I was just thinking, I'll do whatever one else is doing. So I did the military service. But I wasn't very good at it. I remember very distinctly we had one shooting practice. You were supposed to shoot down targets who was coming up through bushes and so on. And I took up my rifle and shot. But my lieutenant shouted to me, "What the hell, Smedjeback, do you think you're Rambo?" So what did I do? Well, of course, I shot from the hip. And everyone knows, of course, you should shoot from the shoulder. So my career in the military was not long nor successful, which I'm quite happy with today. And I actually got a job in a peace organization after my studies at Lund University, where I focused on psychology. And I became a nonviolent project manager. I'm not really sure why they employed me, because I knew very little about nonviolence when I started my job. So my first job was to learn more about the methods and principles of nonviolence. And as you can suspect, quite quickly when you begin with this topic, you run into this little guy. Anyone can recognize him, maybe? Who is it? Gandhi. And who was he? Anyone can tell us? Why is he famous? Anyone? You all know. Yeah? Well, great. Then I don't have to explain that. And he said something interesting about prison. He said, "We shall feel happy and free like a bird, even behind the prison walls. We shall never weary of jail going. When the whole of India has learned its lesson, India shall be free." I think this was interesting. He totally turned the image of the prison upside down. Prison, which is normally seen as something oppressive or limiting, he saw as a tool for change, a possibility. And an equally famous guy, Martin Luther King, said, "One has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws." So this stuck with me also. Not only have we the right to disobey laws sometimes, we have a responsibility to do it when necessary. And while I was reading this, I also had the privilege to meet activists from the Global South. So I had a few trainings in Sudan, and this is a photo from one of the trainings in 2007. And this is Widad being here in a role play. And I didn't have high expectations for Widad, because when she told me why she went to this training, she said, "I've come here to find a man to marry." Period. But later, a few years later, I saw this picture of her. Then she had been imprisoned for 3 weeks for demonstrating in the streets of Khartoum in her country, Sudan, for democracy. As you might know, doing that, you risk actually your life. You risk being tortured, you risk imprisonment. So she is one of my heroes. And I was thinking more and more, if she can risk her life, couldn't I and shouldn't I be willing to risk much less in Sweden, which is so much safer? I came into the peace movement thinking that Sweden was a peace-loving nation. We, at least our politicians, often talk about human rights and the willingness to support democracies and peace. But from my colleagues, I heard more and more what we're actually doing as a country. Actually, we export lots and lots of weapons. This is what I found out. We export them not only to countries in peace, but also countries in war. Not only to democracies, but also to dictatorships. How familiar are you with the Swedish weapons export? You know it a little bit?
It's the highest per capita in the world.
Exactly. We are there. Sometimes, some years we are the highest. In 2011, we were the biggest one in the whole world per person. And it goes a bit up and down. But we are there in the very top when it comes to weapons export. And I don't know if you followed the news about this just last week. It was discovered that Swedish authorities had, in cooperation with KTH, the university in Stockholm, being in cooperation with China on a very advanced software program called EDGE, which China, they think, will use to make the dropping and handling of nuclear weapons from their airplanes. They can use this for their capacity. And this shocked even me, who have seen quite a lot on weapons export. I really didn't think that we would have anything to do with China, since there is a UN embargo and a EU embargo for having any kind of military cooperation with China. But these things are happening. Well, anyway, back now. This I didn't know when I got a request to join in a nonviolent action, where we were supposed to go into a Swedish weapon factory and hammer on weapons. So by knowing this, and I was thinking, now I've actually worked there for 7 years talking about nonviolence, having trainings in nonviolence, and now I wanted to try to use it. So we were a group that started the campaign Avrusta, which means disarm. About a year we prepared for this action. And actually here is Annika, who I wrote to 10 years ago. She was in the group that actually asked me to do this. And here we have a role play where I play a guard and she plays one of us, the peace activist. And we do this to try to, as much as possible, to come up with different scenarios, how to behave in different scenarios. If we do this, what will the guards do then, and so on. And in October 2008, we were ready. And some of us went to Karlskoga, which is a major hub for weapons production. And Alvin here and myself went to Eskilstuna, which is a bit smaller place. And I was thinking to show you a 1-minute clip, if it works, from this action. This is a movie clip we took with our own phones inside. Let's see here.
Jag vill börja röra på dörren, men då får jag inte gått upp. Den jobbar på någonstans.
Nu är vi inne.
Video och avrustar Carl Gustaf-vapen och Sabelgårdsbernadis i Eskilstuna.
So this is what you saw in the pictures. Anyone knows what kind of weapon it is? Yeah.
RPGs, correct?
Sorry?
RPGs, right?
Yes, that's one of the names. It has many names. What kind of a weapon is it?
It's a rocket launcher.
and that also has many names. Bazooka is a normal name, at least in movies. And also anti-tank recoilless rifle is maybe a more technical name, and an RPG. And this particular model has also many different names. The Carl Gustav is one of them, the Gustav, the Goose, according to what army in the world uses it. And it is being used and has been used for a very long time. It began to be in production in the 40s and in many wars, in Burma, Vietnam, Cambodia, India. And we knew that when we did this action, it was being used by the American forces in Iraq. So we also had prepared ourselves in writing a letter. The dictatorship orders weapons, you won't find a press release like that. But in this case, we actually did. So we were pretty sure that they were going abroad. Yeah. Good question. So what happened then? Yes, we after about half a year, we were asked to appear in court, and this is then Alvin and me, and we had lawyers, but we also had our own defense, saying that we thought that they should acquit us. Is that the word? Acquittal? Because these weapons were actually going to be used in Iraq, which was not an attack according to international law. So we said we are following international law by trying to stop this. But the court felt differently. So unfortunately, the sentence was then 4 months in prison and $500,000 crowns in criminal damage. Now, we had expected that they would charge us, and we thought it would be something in this, something like this. I've been thinking about the fact that some people pay a lot of money to go to exotic places and to meet interesting people, right? But also in prison you actually meet another culture and very interesting stories. And you do it all inclusive with no expenses. Pretty sweet deal actually. This is one of the, like a cell of a Swedish prison, very much like the one I have been to. And apart from the interesting discussions you have hearing about their stories, you always, or not always, but often you ask, so what are you in for? And you get to tell why you are in for. And so when they were quite interested in our story, and quite many supported our actions and said, yeah, good. Make those companies pay. But they were very critical towards our methods. Some of them said, well, why come with a sissy hammer when you can blow up the whole company with dynamite? So I think they had a point. I mean, if we would have done that, that would really set back the company and made weapons production impossible for a very long time, right? But why didn't we do that then? Anyone?
You can't fight violence with violence if you're against violence.
You can't fight violence with violence, yeah. Why not? Hypocritical, yeah.
Especially if you're taking a moral stand against it.
I agree. Of course, if we would have used dynamite, there would be quite a large risk to hurt someone. Yeah, you?
Is there any difference to destroy the weapon with the hammer or the bomb?
Yeah, I think so. And one reason was yours, fight violence with violence. I mean, it's some kind of violence, of course, using a hammer, but it's very controlled violence, and you know that no one will get hurt if we don't want them to get hurt. With dynamite, you never know. I mean, someone could be in another building or in the room that we didn't see, and they would have been blown to pieces. And also, of course, I mean, it would be sending not violence only in itself, but also a very violent message. I mean, it's not strange that you think about violence and maybe terrorism when you connect it to bombings and dynamite. So, but it had also a democratic meaning for us, because anyone can use a hammer, almost anyone. But it's very difficult to handle dynamite. Not everyone are capable of that. And we wanted everyone to be able to join, who wanted to join. So what else? When a more serious idea from the other inmates was that what you do after the crime is committed. So a very important when it comes to criminal activity is, of course, you do your crime and then you get away from the crime scene as fast as possible, right? You don't let yourselves be caught. And I think they had a point in that critique also, because if we would try to run away and if we would have succeeded, I don't know if we would have succeeded, but if we had, we could of course go to other weapons factories and stop more weapons. So why didn't we do that? Anyone? Yeah?
Because it's more, I don't know how to word this, but it's more correct to be arrested for something that you do to show that you really managed to do it, if you had a goal in mind. It was more of an act of protest.
Good. Anyone else? There are many reasons, I would say, why we...
You had succeeded the court. You had the facts that you were doing peacefully, and it was wrong to send those weapons.
Yeah. So if we would have been caught, we could defend ourselves in court. Yeah.
I'm guessing the media coverage. Well, afterwards you can take credit for it and spread the word, so that everybody knows that you were doing this because of something that meant something for you.
Yeah. And not only media, I mean, to be able to discuss this very important issue of weapons export, it's very difficult if you're on the run or if you don't, or if you are not open with who you are and how you can be contacted, right? So I wouldn't be here talking to you today if I would be on the run, because any one of you could pick up just the phone and say, hey, he's here. And so any type of communication will be very difficult if you're on the run. Yes. A third and last suggestion the criminals or our fellow inmates had was to steal the weapons, sell them to them. They thought it would be good. They were very keen on getting their hands on a Carl Gustav. Get some cash for yourself and give some to the poor, because they figure out that we thought that was a good thing. Yeah.
Could there be a harder sentence if you try to run? Or is it the same?
I'm not sure actually if it would be harder. If I would guess, I don't think that matters so much, but I really don't know. Anyone else? Anyone studies law maybe? Here? No. Okay, we'll have to find out. Now I was thinking about asking you some questions about civil disobedience in general, but before that, are there some thoughts, questions on this action before? Yeah?
Actually, it was a follow-up question to the, you mentioned something like that a hammer is more controllable than bombs. But let's say that if bombs can be controlled, would you do it?
That's a good question. I don't think I would do it. I mean, you can get pretty far with a normal hammer. I was surprised how many weapons we actually could destroy with a simple hammer. At least 14 of these we managed to destroy. Saab said afterwards in the trial. If we would have been doing it longer, we could have destroyed even more. We were thinking about, should we try to destroy the machines making the weapons? I mean, that would have been more effective when it comes to production, but would it be as clear symbolically as destroy the weapons. No, we thought it would be more understandable for people in general that we go on the weapons themselves. But that's, I understand that you can make different decisions on that. What do you think?
Oh, I was another question.
Sure, yeah.
Do they charge you according to what you destroy? I mean, if you would have destroyed the machinery, then the rate would be higher.
I think so, yeah. And especially the criminal damages would be much higher. Yeah. Now we didn't pay that anyway, but that would be higher, yes. I don't know if we would be sentenced to a longer prison sentence, maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just wondering how useful this initiative is to send a message to weapon exporting companies, because I think if you destroy a couple of weapons in a factory, like the company who owns the factory, I mean, how much will they be affected by it? Probably the people who work in the factory, they might be the ones who suffer from it. And the people who actually, the people from the company who export the weapons, they make millions of dollars anyways, and they will build a new factory. And so will they actually like receive this symbolic message?
I don't think, and we didn't plan to affect the companies themselves a lot. I mean, there are some weapons that won't be used in wars, but the companies themselves won't suffer very much. That's not what we were after. What we were after was to create this kind of discussion, and perhaps that more would be interested in picking up this issue. And actually, we got quite a few people saying, I heard about your action, this made me angry that we have this kind of weapons production and weapons export. Now I also want to join in the peace movement and try to do my best. I think that's the most concrete result from our actions. But also politically, to try to have a discussion and in the end change the rules, change the laws that govern this. That was our aim. Yeah.
You left note or a letter to the workers, but really discussions with the workers, trying to, I mean, maybe some people now working in armed camps would rather use their technology and skills to do other things. So in a way to make it more.
So the question is, do we have any communication with the workers? And actually, I got only one, but I got one email from one of the workers at that very factory afterwards, and he said it was not threatening anyway, but he said, "Oh, why did you have to do that? We have been working on those weapons for quite a long time." So I was a bit disappointed on that. In other cases, we have tried to have discussions. Like in Malmö, there is a factory called Aimpoint, and many times we have been outside giving out coffee for anyone and fika for anyone of them who wants to have some coffee and talk to us. But that has proved quite difficult. And we have also called them and sent letters, can we talk about this? Can we have a meeting about this? But they haven't been very interested, mostly. We had one meeting a few years ago with Saab in Linköping. That was before our actions. Then they were willing to talk to us. Yes. Anyone else?
What was the Swedish government's response to your action, and what was the company's response?
They didn't respond very much at all, actually.
Did the order get cancelled or?
No, unfortunately not. I mean, there were those weapons. They of course had to produce again, so it might have been. I think it was delayed, but it wasn't cancelled. What I know, I mean, many things you don't hear also. But I think, of course, this is a small action. There has to be a lot of more actions and campaigns for any real change in the weapons export. So that was also one of our hopes, that we do one action, but of course it's not enough. There has to be a bit more people who joins for this to have a real effect. Yeah. Okay, can we do an exercise now with you? And it's like this, there will come statements and I will read them, and if you agree with them, you raise from your seat and just stand up, okay? Is that possible? Yeah, you have to put up your desks, I think, and not have anything in your knees. And if you disagree with the statements, just continue sitting. Is that okay? Questions? No? Seriously. And of course, I mean, I don't know if I said that, but I think this should be a safe room where everyone can feel and think what they feel. I won't be offended, and I hope you won't be offended either.
Is there another option, like neutral or I don't know?
It's a bit difficult in this exercise to do that. So, well, I mean, if you don't want to be part of the exercise, I won't force anyone. But it would be, I don't know how you can have a neutral position.
Raise your hand and then you're neutral.
Ah, okay, that's a good one. Yeah, raise your hand if you neutral or you don't want to take a stand on that. Okay. Ready? First statement. Oh yes, yeah. Here is the first statement. Civil disobedience is an important part of a democratic society. Alright, thank you very much. You can sit down. Wow, that was a big majority. We'll take the next one. I think that it's always wrong to damage someone else's property. Okay, good. We have a few courageous ones. Stand up in work. Thank you. We'll take the next one. I would be willing to break the law myself if I thought it could save lives. Thank you. Okay, I know where to call next time we want to do an action on Swedish weapons export. That's great. Next one. Civil disobedience actions are attacks on our democratic system.
Depends on.
Okay, depends. It could be. Okay.
Very generalized question.
Yeah, I know. It is. Okay, next one. One has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. Maybe you recognize that one. Maybe half or a bit more than half. Thank you. Let's see. Maybe I had one more. No. Okay. Now maybe 2 and 2 as you sit, discuss this and maybe also what you heard before in this. What do you think about these questions, these statements, and civil disobedience in general so far in this lecture? Is that okay? Do you just have a few moments of discussion as we sit?
The trouble is that Swedish government
Okay, we can gather. Is there anyone who would like to share something you discussed? Maybe? Yeah.
When it comes to payment of the fees, how do you sort that out?
So when it comes to?
Well, the fees, I suppose.
Oh, right.
If you expect them,
Mm-hmm.
is it like the organization split them or somehow?
No, we
You pay 500,000 yourself?
no, and we had a plan from the beginning not to pay anything, or just at least to try not to pay anything. And the way you do that is to earn so little so that they can't take from you. So when you get the debt, Kronofogden, the Swedish authorities for debt, takes on that debt and tries to get it from you. But we have rules in Sweden where you should be able to keep, or the law gives you the right to keep a certain amount, so you can have for rent and food and clothes and basic necessities. So if you don't earn anymore, well, then they can't take it from you. Now they have managed to take a bit more when I got skatteåterbäring, was that back on my taxes. They managed to take a little bit. Otherwise they haven't managed. So that's the plan. Actually, Saab, now I've done some other actions that I got more criminal damage, but Saab, they, after I think 2 years, they withdrew their claim on that money. I guess maybe they thought that they wouldn't get it because they hadn't got anything those years. So it's cancelled now. That
money.
Sorry?
That money is not a great deal to them anyway.
No,
they
no, of course.
You and Martha, so that's kind of smart for them.
But I was thinking at least that, oh, they want us to really pay to have this on our backs for a long time. But yeah, I don't know.
May I ask you how much or how little you can earn before?
Yeah, I think it's about 5,000 plus rent or something like that per month. I think, yeah. Now I have my own company now. I don't have any employment, because if I would have employment, they can go to my employer and take it directly, whatever is left above that. But it's more tricky for them when you have your own company, because then I got someone here, someone there. So it's harder for them to keep track. So I think I can earn a bit more than they won't notice. Okay, so what I was thinking, it's a bit tricky, this concept of civil disobedience, and actually there isn't a very clear definition, so it changes according to who you ask. So I think, having been to a lecture on civil disobedience, you should have some idea of what it is. And there are actually 5 components that most people agree should be included for it to count as civil disobedience. And I was thinking that you could help me with that. So what are the 5s? Let's see if you can take them all. Can you help me? Yes, someone start? Non-violence, good one, yes. So no violence, yeah. What else? Sorry? Yes, exactly. Against a law of some, even orders in some cases, yes. Break the law.
Maybe that it has to be done with a higher purpose than just
Yes.
to make.
Exactly. So it's not for pure self-interest. It has to have some ideological and political reason behind it. Very good. Yes. What else?
Perhaps not focusing it on a specific person,
maybe that goes together with what you said in this the purpose. Yeah, yeah. I would maybe wouldn't put that as something specific or.
It should be an open action.
Right. So open with your identity, who you are, and something. Last one, a bit connected to that one, but still not quite the same. What's that? We have been talking about it before.
If you're a private person,
No, I wasn't thinking of that.
that you're liable for your actions.
Yeah, exactly. Willingness to take whatever punishment. Yeah, exactly. Very good. So those are the 5s, and I was thinking as to mention them. So break the law, and one example. Do you know what they're doing here? What kind of action is this?
They are in the place for white people.
Yes.
In the United States.
Exactly.
It's a sit-in.
Exactly. The sit-in they call it. Yeah. So this is a clear violation. What I read about it, I think it was not actually in the laws that white people had and black people couldn't sit there. It was like in the culture and some kind of silent agreement. But of course they broke the rules. So as you said, it should have a higher purpose. I don't know if you heard about this action. Greenpeace, they tested the security at some nuclear plants. And of course the higher purpose was to critique the nuclear plants, not to have a high security, and to make us aware that it's a big risk of having these plants. What else? Yes, without violence. And some of us who think that Gandhi had some good ideas, we say that, okay, it should be without violence, but that's not enough. We should also treat everyone with kindness and respect. And I don't know if you recognize this fellow. He was, his name is General Jan Soja. I don't know if he's still alive, probably not. He was the one who was in charge of arresting Gandhi when Gandhi did his first civil disobedience campaigns in South Africa. And when Gandhi was in prison for this, he made sandals. And he actually gave that to his opponent, Jan Soja. And Jan Soja, he said this: "I have worn these sandals for many a summer since then, even though I feel that I'm not worthy to stand in the shoes of so great a man." So that's to go beyond without violence. Yes, open and public. So one example, before we did our action, we made this homepage, the website, and we had our names and phone numbers and email addresses, also explaining what we're going to do, but leaving out the details of where and when we're going to do it, obviously. But anyone could get in contact with us, and we felt that was important. We could have missed things, people coming with critique and saying, "Oh, did you think about this?" Which could make us think again and maybe not go through with it. I mean, that was a possibility. So, and the last one, willingness to face the consequences. It doesn't mean that you agree that the court is right, of course, of sentencing you. You can still feel that we should be able to do this within the law, that we have the right. But you do go to court and you take your sentence. Now with the criminal damage, maybe someone of you have thought about that. Well, then you should pay your criminal damages. Well, we felt that went against what we were doing. We don't want to pay the weapons factories to do even more weapons. So that's the ideological higher reason which goes against this. Since I did this action and also before, I've been thinking about this, whether we obey or disobey. And most of us, I think everyone, including me, have a very strong desire to obey. And I don't think this is by chance. We learn to obey since we are small children. We should obey our parents firstly, and our teachers, and those that makes the rules and laws in our country. And it's quite a good thing also in many ways. I mean, if we didn't have traffic rules, and if we didn't obey the traffic rules, many more people would be killed. So it's quite good to have some common rules that guide our treatment of one another, I think. But the problem is, of course, when we have decisions or unjust laws, and if we still obey them. Anyone recognize this guy? Yes, that's right. An American author and philosopher, maybe you could say. He said this: I think that we should be men first, and women perhaps, and subjects afterward. It is not desirable to cultivate respect for the law so much as for the right. The only obligation which I have a right to assume is to do at any time what I think right. I think this comes from the book that was later called On Civil Disobedience, which was one of the founding works on this idea, although it was his editor that came up with the term civil disobedience. But many then say, well, hey, civil disobedience really undermines our democracy. Individuals have to follow the majority. That's the idea of democracy, right? So when you do civil disobedience, you take the law into your own hands, and maybe we'll end up like this, like in the parliament in Ukraine, before the conflict started, actually. So, yeah, maybe. Okay, so maybe they have a point, but there are others. Maybe you students know who this is. Anyone? Yeah. John Rawls, yes, very good. He says that civil disobedience actually can increase, it can strengthen democracy. And his idea is, perhaps, I haven't actually read that book, but a theory of justice is, I think, quite common, maybe even today, among students in their studies, like in political science, perhaps. Is someone who have read it here? No? Okay, but there he argues that civil disobedience, it grows out of problems that you have in a society, right? Injustices, or when there is inequality. So if civil disobedience is there, it can correct these injustices. And if you correct injustices and oppression, then in the end you will have a stronger democracy. And actually there are three parties in the parliament in Sweden who basically agrees with him that we need civil disobedience. Even Kristdemokraterna has wording on this. Even if they don't mention civil disobedience, they say, well, there is something higher than the law, something like that. And if you think about it, these rights that we have today in Sweden and in many other countries are actually because there has been civil disobedience in the past. So take, for instance, the workers demonstrating for the rights when there were no right to demonstrate, or especially to strike or form workers' union. They did it anyway, and after many decades that came into law, the right to form unions and to strike. I don't know if you know the story of Aftonbladet, the second biggest paper in Sweden. It was founded in 1830 by Lars Johan Hierta, who was a liberal man, and it quite quickly became critical on the king that ruled Sweden at that time. Do you know this story? No? What did the king do? Well, he had the power to do basically anything, so he shut down the paper and said, hey, you don't have the right to exist anymore. So what was their response? Well, then they came up with a new paper it was basically the same paper but with a new name. The second, they call it the second Aftonbladet. And of course the king didn't like that they kept on criticizing him, so she shut down the second Aftonbladet. And then they came up with the third Aftonbladet, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth. And it continued like this up to the 26th Aftonbladet. Then the king was fed up and said, okay, you can have your paper and continue criticizing me. So they won the struggle. And after a while, I don't know how long it took, it came into law, of course, with the freedom of press and those kind of rights that we take for granted today. And you can think, well, this was in history, it was a long time ago. But actually, even to this day, things happen that changes laws, but also policies and behaviors of companies and authorities. So this is an example from Skånetrafiken, a bus company from where I'm from originally. They didn't allow people with wheelchairs on their buses. This was in the late 90s. And there was an organization called the Disabled Youth who protested, and they called them and sent letters and say, we also want to go on the buses. I mean, we don't have the possibility to go where we want because of this rule you have. It didn't do any good. The company just said, no, we can't do it. So what did they do? Well, they came one morning just before the bus was leaving, and one of them came in their wheelchairs and sat in the front of the bus. And the other one rode with his or her wheelchair behind the bus. And what happened? Well, of course, the driver didn't want to drive because he would run someone over on them. So he had no choice of just stopping there and miss his route. And the media was there, and they interviewed the youth in the wheelchairs and took pictures and so on. 2 days after his action, Skånetrafiken said, oh, of course we will change, of course you can go on our buses with your wheelchairs. So things happen even today with civil disobedience. And I mean, many people say, well, you should really consider carefully if you want to break the law. And I agree, you should. You should think a lot about that. But you should also consider obeying the law. Because there are many disasters happening all the time when people just obey without thinking. We can see this historically, and we can see this today. So maybe ask this question: with what right do I refrain from acting when oppression and injustice occur? If we could do that a bit more often. And if we not only stare at the law blindly and without thinking about other things, maybe we instead can ask question, what is the best thing I can do for others? That's something I think would be good for the world. I'll end there and open up for some more discussions. Any other comments and questions that you have?
Yeah. I simply find that the act of destroying the properties of some, I didn't thought that it was efficient, because in a way that, like example that you made with Aftonbladet, if the politicians or the policymakers still have the violence in them, they can let that violence out in other ways too. Probably not weapon transport, probably by sending troops, financial aid, all kinds of these kind of things. So my point is just being that they don't really understand that, like, there's no true communications with you and people who you strongly disagree with. So there's no communication between you guys, and unless there's a communication, nothing fundamental is solved. That's my opinion.
Okay, that might be true, but I also think that now if we look at the peace movement and the peace issues, it's not as big as I would like it to be, but it still consists of many different organizations, and I think they play different parts, and it's good that we have different organizations doing different parts. So some of them have more contact with politicians, some of them like us do more direct actions, and I'm a part of many different ones at the same time, or maybe fluctuating between them. And I think together we can actually change, because it's not working if you only have direct action. You have to have other parts as well. Now, I didn't say so much about that, but in our campaign we had it for about 2 years, and this disarmament action is only one small part of our whole campaign. So we had articles in papers we wrote, and also, of course, we got sometimes interviewed. We had we invited parliamentarians to discuss the weapons export issues with us, and sometimes together with different organizations and things like that, like normal organizations do every day. But if it's effective or not, I mean, I think that's for the future to judge. We don't really know, because I think these things don't change very fast, even if they're successful.
There's a study on the critical mass, and 5% of the population is standing for something. It usually turns upside down, depending on what topic. So what you're doing is mobilizing for a critical mass. Kind of, that's what I see.
I heard about that too, and
why civil resistance works. I forgot the names of the researchers.
Right, Chenoweth and another one. That's a really good book. Yeah, you should look it up. Why civil resistance works. Yeah.
I was wondering, because I guess the target is to stop Sweden to export weapons. And I was wondering if you are also considering to do how it will impact in the economy of Sweden, and if how it will impact, maybe it could also bring a plan to reconvert this industry, so people is not losing their jobs, so there is not any argument to keep this industry.
Well, that's a good point, and we have been thinking about that. I mean, we think that all people should be able to have a job. Now, even though Sweden is a very big weapons producer and exporter compared to other countries, it's still a quite small part of our total export. It's only about 1% of our total export of Sweden. So for the industry to make that change from military to civil production wouldn't be that big. Now, I'm not an expert on how to do that change, but I think others are. So I don't think that I have to have the answers on exactly how to do that, but to take that into consideration, I think it's very important. That's an important thing. But I think nowadays politicians support the weapons industry a lot. I mean, we pay with our tax money for most of the weapons production and research behind it. If that or only a part of that could be used for this for civilian purposes, civilian products, that could quite easily take care of that change. That's why I think this.
Do you think civil disobedience could be effective as a national defense strategy?
Yeah, I think so. I would like to see civilian-based defense, and I think you don't have to do it, of course, from military to civilian overnight, but slowly changing it to more and more civilian. I mean, now we don't have anything of that kind. I think in the 80s or 90s it was more discussed how you actually can have a more of a civilian-based defense. And of course, civil disobedience, it's a big part of that, because if we were, even if that's very unlikely, if we were occupied, that's what we have to do. We have to resist the occupiers and make it so difficult to lead our country, or make it impossible to lead the country. I mean, that's the lesson we have from India. They were occupied by the biggest superpower of that time, and they managed. They didn't have a civilian-based defense first, but they built up a mass campaign against it.
The Swedish weapon industry,
But again,
Is it on Sweden the money from the weapon itself, or is it also a political stand we do instead of weapons?
I think, I mean, one has to be clear that the money that is made on the weapons production export, it goes mainly to the companies and those who owns the company. That's where the major money goes. And of course, there is a lot of pressure from those companies and those who own them, like Wallenbergarna, to make the politicians want to allow them to sell these weapons. But then, of course, some politicians say, well, we get some tax money from these companies. And I mean, that's the reality, although it's not a lot.
Is it also worldwide policy?
Yeah, I mean, there could be other reasons. I'm not sure. But if you want to have more cooperation with another country, maybe it's good that you don't then have trade with them, including military trade. I mean, that could be a reason. Possibly, but I think it's mostly, and when Reinfeldt, our Prime Minister, talks, he mostly talks about job creation, but who knows what's the real motivation. I mean, I think that's something real for him, but I think that's what they think the people want to hear, that we get jobs from.
You have certain ideas of what is unjust, and there might also be other people that have other ideas of what is unjust, and your right to act will give them the right to act as well, I guess. What, do you see any danger with that, or what's your thoughts on that?
No, that's right, of course. Anyone can use civil disobedience, and I might not always agree with their views and their ideas, but that's living in democracy. Everyone has to make up their own mind of what's right. So just because it's the method of civil disobedience doesn't mean that you or me would necessarily think it's a good idea to do it. But that I think you have to decide and for yourself, but also in communication with others, because I don't think if it's good that individuals take that action only. It's a bit of a safety mechanism to be more than one also, and also to be open to discussion with others.
I was thinking about the first statement that you made about civil disobedience being an important part of a democracy, which I agree with, but do you think that it should have to be? I mean, would you think that in the perfect ideal democracy there would still be a purpose of civil disobedience, or would you rather try for like more not disobedient ways of political action first? Is it your first action, or would you try to go the ordinary channels first?
In a perfect democracy, there wouldn't be need of civil disobedience, no. But I don't think we will have a perfect democracy. I mean, there will always be things that we need to improve, but of course, I mean, and we did think about this before we did action, and I think everyone should think about that. Are there other ways, easier or less risky ways for us individuals, but also, better ways to act before? And in this case, we thought, well, the peace movement has been trying to decrease and stop weapons export for a very long time. We need something like this at this moment, because it's also a matter of time. If it is it now we should do it, should we have done it before, or rather more realistically, should we wait for it? Maybe it's a more opportune moment in a while. Yeah. What do you think?
Sorry, it's another topic.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just thinking about what are the consequences of people that usually practice civil disobedience, because it doesn't seem to me that it's something that you can do and then go to a normal life as any other citizen, because a lot of doors are shut, I think, after going to jail and all these things. I'm just wondering which are the consequences of practicing civil disobedience.
Well, that's a very good question, and it's something that we were thinking about a lot. I mean, how will this affect our lives? And for myself, I had a worry that I wouldn't be like I would be on the fringe and not ever being asked to maybe have trainings, which is what I do now, or lectures. And also I know Kattis in our group, she said, will I be able to keep my job at fritidsgård, what's that, youth daycare or youth place. So she asked her boss, and before we did action, how do you feel about me doing this disarmament action? And she said, wow, that's a great thing. What an inspiration you are for the kids here, doing this important thing. So I guess it's about the employer you have. And I think the fear you have of having doors shut for you, it might be bigger than it actually is in reality. That's my experience, at least. Yeah. But I do understand that one would have those thoughts. One should also think about, when it comes to the consequences, you can find actually a much better place in Sweden to do them. I can critique the Swedish prison system quite a lot, but in comparably relative other countries, it's quite human, I would say. Having example, having had a pen pal in the US while I was in prison, I exchanged some letters with a peace activist in a US prison, and just comparing his situation. There were, I think, like 100 people in the same room. He could like stretch out his hand and feel the other person lying in the bed there, and the same on that side. And when you saw that we get our own room, we can lock our doors and so on. It's quite another thing. And you don't get very long sentences in general for those kind of actions. In the US, maybe you could get 1-2 years for that kind of action. So, if you are in Sweden, it's better. Yes. Anything else? Yeah.
Have you considered less destructive ways of protesting the weapons factory? For example, you could block the entrance to the factory so the workers couldn't enter. Just the fact that you basically destroyed something doesn't really sit well with me.
Okay. Yeah, we do all kinds of actions. We have been doing blockades. Also, I don't know if I mentioned Nätverket UFO, but that's the organization network that I've been doing. And we do lots of different actions. But we felt that we wanted to do a bit of a, I don't know, stronger action, at least at one point. We felt that they came away too easily. I mean, they can handle blockades. Okay, they can handle destruction of weapons too, but at least that's a bit more tricky for them to handle. And we wanted it shouldn't be easy to produce and export weapons. But as I said, it was not mainly for the companies. We think that hopefully it has a bigger impact. And it was inspired by other actions, of course, from other countries as well, having done similar things. I wanted to show you a book when we speak about weapons export and also our democracy. There are some problems in our democracy. You can find it at Saudi Vapen, which is about the affair about the military cooperation that Swedish authorities have had, planning to build a weapons factory in Saudi Arabia, one of the worst dictatorships in the world. It just came out and it's thrilling. It's almost like watching House of Cards. But the difference is this is for real, but it's also very scary that we have politicians and people in our government and that act this secretly and corruptly like they do. But it's a fantastic work these journalists have done trying to discover that. So, yeah.
Do you believe that the Swedish politicians have power globally at all to act in any way in disobey the global laws of the world? Like now I'm talking informal laws. Like it does surprise me also. But to live in a country where one of the only politicians that they had who spoke out about peace and wanted to make peace and stood up for people's rights were shot in open streets in the 80s. Since then we haven't had any politicians who speak out for peace or disobey the global leaders or the elites of this world. Like, do you actually believe that the Swedish politicians have any power?
No, I do believe that actually. I mean, if they would like to, I mean, they have lots of power to change this. And I don't think we're very far from it, even though lots of things have to change. But, of course, I mean, what you find out here is how much the companies pressure politicians. But, I mean, they can take a stand and say, hey, the companies shouldn't decide what we do in our country. We should decide. And that human rights is more important than a few crowns or dollars here and there. I mean, they could do that, absolutely. And of course also if we change the power structure of the parliament and government, that would help. But even the Social Democrats have a big... yeah, we can be very critical of. Yeah. Now I think we have to wrap this up.
Yeah,
what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say thank you to you for this evening. I'm sure everyone will agree it was a really interesting lecture. So if we can give Martin a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.